recent blow up, it's still revolved on the fundamental issue is who controls the Strait of Hormuz. And the
Iran
Iranian
does.
Iran does, yes. And Iran thought that was what the
That's
MOU
not an
said.
issue.
Yeah, that's what it says. But why Donald Trump is compelled to challenge that, right? They ask those ships to direct them to go through the southern route, the Omani channel, rather than going through the Iran designated Iranian channel. Why? Like, why does he even bother? Why can't Donald Trump just chill? You know, he can just chill and do nothing.
Okay, yeah. Tell me when Donald Trump has chilled, other than on the golf course, while he's dropping another ball in lieu of the one that kind of got away, or that his forward caddy forgot to drop for him. No, I mean he's reacting day by day. He's obviously extremely uncomfortable. You saw the speech yesterday. This was not the triumphant guy who used to stand up there going on ad nauseum, about stuff you couldn't even follow. He read from the teleprompter. Unfortunately, he didn't have his regular teleprompter there. Why? Because that teleprompter was making bets on what was going to be said, because he had the script. I don't know if you saw that. I thought that was hilarious. But anyway, I don't know that it's a crime, because it's public knowledge. I suppose if it's a secret, he could be prosecuted for that. But anyways, they put him on temporary or permanent things. But in the end, this was not Donald Trump's finest hour. And this is a situation where he feels very much on his back foot. And this is his last hope that he can somehow get the Senate and the House to pass this bill, because otherwise he doesn't have anything. So this is how they're connected. There was no way for him to go through with the Iranian truce. I shouldn't say truce, ceasefire. He had derided everybody who had given them money and said, you've strengthened them, and that you have to give up your nuclear materials, and we get to inspect and do this and that. None of those were realistic. And as a result, you have a situation where Donald Trump, my feeling was at the time was that he was just buying time. He says on a daily basis, well, let's see if we can get the price of oil down today. I'll tell my friends, all right, that I'm going to be, doing something with Iran, declaring victory, or, saying that a truce is coming, and they can buy into the market, and they can profit off the swings of the market. And obviously, a lot of people were doing that based on these kind of irregular bets that are made 30 minutes before. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of bets. So I'm going to put it pretty certain it wasn't the teleprompter guy. If he had hundreds of millions of dollars, I doubt he would be working in media, just trying to figure out the scripts for putting on the television. So, he's in a very bad situation. He's trying to make the best of it. He keeps changing things. It's not going to, I don't see it as working out, unfortunately. I do see this leading to a global recession. People have to come to terms with that. Within the next couple of months, the cushion, these oil reserves, are going to start disappearing. Ironically, though, China is doing very well. I mean, they huge demand destruction. And what I mean by demand destruction is they've gone to other things. So they're taking some coal, and they're reducing it into materials that can be used for synthetics. Okay, it's a little bit more expensive, but so is oil right now. So is gas. So it's actually less expensive than buying on the open market. But they've been able to keep the reserves largely intact. And this isn't something I'm saying, it's an observation by the US intelligence agency, who for some reason think that it's okay to monitor what the Chinese are doing, but they don't want the Chinese monitoring what they're doing. It's kind of a one-sided thing. We're the good guys, we should see what you do. You're bad guys, you shouldn't see the stuff we're doing. Anyways, it's pretty clear that China has the largest cushion, so they can last longer. But at some point, all right, this becomes very deadly serious, because China will suffer if the world economy goes, because it's China that's buying resources and exporting value added. You only can export value added if people want to buy. And if there's a global recession, there's going to be a real hurt felt all the way around. Now, China has not been sitting there, wringing their hands and saying, what do we do? They have been doubling down. You saw more recently the meeting with Putin. Well, they had the meeting with Putin, but then you had this 25th anniversary of the neighborliness and friendship treaty, etc. And they just start talking about increasing their goals, doing more stuff. They still haven't resolved the power of Siberia 2, which would bring 50 million or billion cubic feet or inches of gas into China, which is a step above the power of Siberia 1, which brings in 35 billion cubic inches, well, meters, whatever, cubic centimeters? No, cubic meters probably, of gas. Very large amount. That is overpriced. Obviously, Russia is saying, look, if you want it long term, this is an expensive project, who's going to pay for what, and what is the price going to be? And that's largely a negotiation. I think China feels that this isn't the right time because, obviously Russia has the upper hand because of the situation. I think they'd rather negotiate this during peacetime when gas prices are perhaps more regulated. More have come down and supply is better. They're not in any hurry, obviously, to get it done. So you have a situation where China is in good shape in terms of its reserves, but it's in bad shape in terms of what happens to a global economy that's in recession. But it's not just bad for China. We're talking about the whole world. And this is, Carl, I've told you a dozen times, or every time that we've mentioned this thing is, the only solution I see to the situation is if the rest of the world finally comes together, and they don't have to form a group. They just, get a bunch of people who go to these three countries individually, whatever. They announce it on TV. Look, you three have to knock it off because you're affecting the rest of us. And we want to sit down. We want to give this a shot. We will all sit down together and we'll try to figure out how to make this work. All right. And we'll try to put in appropriate guarantees. But if for some reason, one or all of you do not want to participate or go along with what is a reasonable resolution for this, then we'll just stop trading with you. The United States imported $4.3 trillion worth of goods. That is not, if those go away, it's not like, we'll just spend less. No, a lot of those are necessities and things like this, and that would completely ruin the U.S. economy. Plus, if the U.S. cannot export, remember that U.S. is the number 2 export country in the world, and a lot of those are services. If those are all cut off, the American economy would literally crash within weeks. The stock market would be reduced to a third of its value. There would be chaos in the streets, massive firings all across the board, and this would not be sustainable. Israel would be in the same position. They actually export a lot of things, but it would take a lot of resolve for all these countries to say that. Iran would be in the same boat. If for some reason they say, no, we won't do that, well, fine, you do no trade. If their oil revenues are cut off and they cannot purchase anything, their economy would also rapidly decline even more than it already has. So I do think that this is the only solution. The problem is the leadership to bring that together is just not there. You have a hopelessly divided world. You have groups that have basically been put in power or been empowered by Washington, and we've seen this in different parts of South America and also in Africa and other places, and they're doing part of that is being a lot of pressure is being put on places like the South Sea Islands. Remember, the National Endowment for Democracy, which was created because of the Iran-Contra oil for arms situation, moved covert action of destabilizing countries into the public realm. It is still run by the CIA. It's financed and directed, in theory, by the Congress, and that's the majority of their funds. And they're in 80 countries. There's only 195, 98, depending how you want to count. countries out there, and there are 80 of them, and they explicitly say that they are promoting democracy, which means that they are promoting getting rid of whoever is in there. Do it, and you've seen their activities in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, anywhere they can get into, and try to destabilize those countries. And it's not just there. I mean, Arab Spring, that was them. All those shiny posters that all looked alike. Where do poor people get the money to start printing posters like that? Did you ever notice in Hong Kong that they had gas masks and all these wonderfully glossy signs and materials and all of these things, and how is it that poor students who are complaining that they have no money, they're too poor, all right, and that's part of their grievances are suddenly having all of these materials. Well,
and all the signs are in English.
Yes,
across
all
the world.
signs in English. Yeah, it's amazing how that happens, right? And then you have this Apple newspaper or whatever it was called, and they have unexplained $15 million in their bank. I mean, they weren't making money; they were losing it.
They were losing money for years. The Apple Daily,
every single month. All right, and yet when they grab this guy, they find $15 million in an account, and there's no way to figure out where that money came from. Okay, so I mean, obviously there are outside forces at work, and this is the mess that we now have today. I mean, think of it this way: you have a hegemon, the United States, that has been an empire builder. We go out, we solve things by taking things from other people, whether it's the American Indians or the French, the British, the Mexicans, whoever is necessary, the Spanish. We take what we need, and sometimes we buy it. Sometimes a little extra pressure helps. And now we're at this kind of period where that isn't working. We threatened to take over Greenland. Well, our allies, for some reason, weren't happy about it because Greenland's part of NATO. And so it was like a retrench. Well, we have to establish our dominance, but we don't have a plan B, because plan B would have to admit that we are not the king of the world, all right? That we're not exceptional anymore. We're just part of the world, and we need to cooperate with the world. And that might mean that we have to submit to the same rules as everybody else. Shocking that, eh? UN, we establish it, but we don't actually follow it. Very strange idea. But now we've basically withdrawn so much funding from it, especially the World Health Organization and all the entities that are promoting any kind of culture, social improvement, etc. So, you have the situation that the U.S. is going through a transition at the same time that we're having a transition economically. I mean, the digital revolution is as consequential as the industrial revolution. It is changing things. First time ever that you're starting to see white-collar workers, they're now on the firing line. AI is going to replace anybody who was just gathering and collating and passing information up the line. You don't need that. What could be done in a week by one person can now be done in about 20 seconds by AI. So there's issues about reliability and things like that, but there are ways around that. My point is, it's so much cheaper for the companies that it's almost impossible. And if your company doesn't do it, guess what? Your competitors will. And then they'll underprice you, and you'll be out of business. So it turns from being something that you choose to being an absolute necessity. And that was the same thing when companies started relocating outside Europe and America and Japan. The fact is, they to keep up with their competitors, they had to respond to the pricing pressure. And this is the market. It doesn't solve things, actually. It can create problems. Not that I'm against it. I think the market is really efficient at the lower level, but in terms of policy, markets are not about policy. They're about profits. And you can't run a country on profits, because countries don't make profits. They have people, and they're responsible for them. And you have to take care of them, give them a safe place to live, work, and play, give them opportunity. All right, give them a sense of respect. Make sure that they're wedded to the future. And unfortunately, a lot of countries are failing in that regard. And ironically, most of them are the developed countries. developing countries, despite the fact that they still have a lot of problems, are a lot more hopeful about the future than the developed countries. And that's a 180-degree turn within the last 15, 20 years. And you can see it quite clearly also in the growth rates. The developed countries are about less than half of what the developing countries are in terms of growth rates. Now, developing countries obviously are starting from a lower bar. 4% of something very small is not as great as 1% of something that's very large. But it just goes that year after year, you're seeing a disparity in growth rates between them. And a lot of that has to do with the Belt and Road Initiative. China's willingness to invest I think it's $1.4 trillion since 2015 has made a huge difference. I mean, what's that? Lambantota port in Sri Lanka. You remember that one?
Yeah, that was
yes.
listed as example of China's debt trap diplomacy, by some Indian think tank, and then it was picked up by all.
No, not a think tank. Professor Chilani, who I appear with on Indian shows quite often. He invented the word debt trap diplomacy, and he used Hambantota Port as the prime example. Well, lo and behold, many years later, because to develop a port, you don't open it up and it's like a shopping mall, everyone pours in. It's taken some years to develop, but now they're actually expanding the port because there's so much business there. And they're not expanding it slightly, they're expanding it by a third. And what they did is they did not repeat the same business that Colombo, the port to the north, was doing. They went to roll on, roll off type movement of goods, and that has done very well. Plus, it's very well managed now, and they have very, very good logistics in terms of getting things on and off. A lot of it is robots and high tech. There's less people dying because it's a lot safer when the people are up in a nice, quiet, controlled, air-conditioned room, pushing things around with their mice, as opposed to trying to manhandle large pieces of cargo. So this is a perfect example, though, of how this narrative that was created mostly in the United States, that somehow China was out to harm the world, or there was some sort of a nefarious motives in this. The only thing that's nefarious is that the U.S., by definition, by being an empire, we always think that we're going to take advantage of another country. So we assume any other country that's rising would do the same thing. This is that kind of guilty thing. I'm a thief, but I know everyone else is a thief. So therefore, I'm just stealing from them before they steal from me. The parallel to that is, I remember talking to somebody. I said, you really believe the world is a horrible place? And he nodded and he says, yeah, it is. It's a horrible place. And the only way to get by is to be more horrible than everybody else. And he nodded. Yeah, that's the way it is. I felt sorry for him. Because here's somebody who's constructed a world model in his head, which he's never going to get out of. I mean, this is the strongest prison there is. Once I believe something, all right, I'm not, if I say I can't do it, I'm not going to try. Therefore, it never will happen, right? So in this particular case, they build this world model where it's me against everybody, and it's very negative. It's hard for them to get along with their children or have friends or any kind of meaningful life, because they think life is horrible and everybody's horrible just like me. It's just I'm more horrible than them. It's kind of giving yourself a life sentence of negativity. And I'm not saying go out and get a crystal and say things. I'm just saying that if you believe in, if you want hope, you have to believe in it. You can't believe that there's no hope and say, well, I'm a pessimistic optimist. Why? How is that possible? So, I mean, it's my version of karma, that we in essence we create our own karma because we construct the worlds that we're in. And I prefer a world where I hope there's some hope, and I believe in working towards it. Why not? What's the alternative, I always say. So how did we get on that diatribe? I have no idea.
That was great, actually. I love it when you would just go off and I just sit here and listen. I always get a free education that way. But I think
or you go to sleep.
Well, by Occam's razor, I think your explanation of why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing right now makes perfect sense, because now he's coming out with he's just creating, instead of addressing the problem, he's just creating distractions after distractions. This is why we have ridiculous stories about Pentagon releasing like videotape of aliens, like, but I don't think that people buy that anymore, though. The thing is, I don't think people buy that anymore, because I look at
those. You look like some of those aliens. I'm not sure. Look, he would do anything to distract attention, and he will continue to do that. This isn't over. I mean, every day, just watch. Anybody watching this, please get up in the morning and then just say, okay, what's Donald's latest? All right. And you'll be like, wow, okay, now it makes sense.
But do people still buy those distractions? Because, like, the alien story, right?
The press does. They hunt it down. They fact check everything. They know he's lying. Why are you fact checking known lies? And there's too many of them. I'd say 50 lies. How are you going to do it?
I look on the social media, right? When that alien story broke out, the top comment is also, okay, that's great. What about Epstein files? How about releasing the Epstein files? Because everybody kind of catching up to Donald Trump's game now. Like, okay, that is an obvious op. That's a distraction, because he doesn't want to release Epstein files. And the same story. I mean, like, at least for me, it's also his accusation of China manipulating election. I mean, that's so obvious. Another like thing he just throwing out there to create a distraction. I haven't been living in the United States for, I don't know, like since the pandemic. So I don't know if people buy that, but I mean, for any thinking people, how can you still buy that? Like,
I mean, the Iran war right now is, to him, he doesn't care about the death and destruction or anything like that. What he cares about is that this is going to affect the election. And, yesterday you heard him going forward and saying, it's China, although he couldn't, there were no allegations. It's just like they have access. Well, why do they have access? But I have to get this off my chest. So in 2015, there was a leak of about 91 million or 100 some odd million, details about voter rolls. And then 2 years later, there's 191 million leaks. And then a few years later, there was another leak of about 4.7 million information about voters. Well, okay, let me explain this to people who don't understand. First off, this was not hacks. These were the incompetence of the people who were supplying the services who accidentally let this information out, and it was free for anybody to sit down and copy. But on top of that, I used to run elections in the US. I used to purchase this material, which, you'd pay so many dollars and they'd send you the voter rolls for any area that you defined. So if I was running a local election, I'd say, okay, I need the voter rolls for this thing. And I'd say I want for the last 5-10 years, whatever. And I want to see voter patterns, people who vote more often. Now, I don't get their names and addresses and things like that, or the personal details, but I can get it on a ward by ward basis. And that gives me a basis to make some projections and say, okay, what are the big issues here? So that's all the little stuff. My point is, he's making allegations that make no sense. This stuff has been around for a long period of time. It was not Chinese hacking. If it was hacking, why didn't he produce the smoking gun? Why? Because there is no smoking gun. Otherwise, I assure you, he would have, said, here it is, here's the proof. And, it's just, if he really believed this, that China had interfered in the election, and he has all of this, secret declassified information, which is just a rehash of everything I just said, why isn't he saying, I'm going to put 100 or 10,000% tariffs on Chinese goods because they interfered in the election? But I want people to think about something. The only fair elections that have been had were when Democrats were in the White House, because those are the only two times that he won. The only time he lost, he was in control of the federal government. So I'm trying to get this understanding that somehow everything was rigged against him. So this is Donald Trump.
Like you said, Donald, why would, if China really did that, somehow affected the outcome of 2020 election, that unseated Trump and got Biden elected, if that was the case, why didn't Donald Trump bring this up back then or back in the last election? Right?
Because,
I mean, like that was...
No, it was, he said it was all covered up. I'm declassifying it now. There was many things happening, deep state, all of this type of stuff. Now, he hasn't said who in the deep state, all right? I'm sure he's going after anybody he doesn't like and calling them deep state just for doing their job. But I mean, this is all innuendo, all right? He has no facts whatsoever. He's just throwing it out there to, as I said, to distract people. To make a few people wonder, well, maybe there is something to this. How many pages? Oh, not thousands of pages. Well, there's 3 million pages of Epstein files unaccounted for. A few 100,000 pages of old material. There's nothing that I could see. I went down quickly through the list of things that they said they're declassifying. It was they had a list on CNN, and I was just like, well, this is all old stuff. There's nothing new here. Where's the smoking gun? He's trying to make it that somehow he didn't know about this. Well, it was publicized that there were these data leaks in 2015 and 2017. So how is that China's fault that you have an incompetent, vendor? That's a real weird one. And yet, if he really thinks that China has interfered, where was I'm going to put tariffs on them, I'm going to put sanctions on them. Instead, he's going to host Xi at a state visit. It doesn't sound like somebody, you interfered with my election. Come on over to the house. Let's have a barbecue.
Oh, that's right. She's coming. She's coming to America in September or something.
Yeah,
right?
We'll see.
Or
we'll
supposedly.
The latest statement from the government, they weren't amused by this, but basically they shrugged it off. They just said this is nonsense and things like that, but they didn't say we're going to start putting sanctions on somebody or blacklisting anybody or anything like that. But neither did Trump. And China has a tendency to only respond to aggressive moves by the U.S. as a warning that this will not go unanswered. Don't think you can, basically kick us and we're just going to stand there and grin at you. That's not the way the game is going to be played. You kick us, we'll kick you. And, if you want to keep kicking, we'll keep kicking. And this is exactly what things. But obviously, when Donald Trump and Xi Jinping met in Beijing not too long ago, he was saying wonderful things about Beijing and about Xi Jinping and all of these types of things. So was his entire crew. I mean, the whole cabinet was sticking to the same line, which is unusual because most of his cabinet absolutely detests China. And they always say China's the problem, but they didn't. And that means that China figured out some way of handling him. And I believe firmly that it was transactional, that you said, Donald, you do A and we'll do B. You do C and we'll do D. They'll work their way through the alphabet. And, Donald Trump, if he has something he wants, he'll do that. I mean, it's very simple for him to understand. You have something I want. If I do this, you'll give me that. Oh, okay, let's do that. He understands that. That's not strategy. This is just, I'm getting what I want. So, but, with the Iranian war and mistakes and things like this, it's just gotten completely out of control. He's done exactly the opposite of what he promised to do. It's the exact, it's what he ridiculed all the other presidents for doing, and spending trillions of dollars in the Middle East and dead bodies and all this kind of stuff in a useless, stupid war where we get nothing. Now he's the guy who's waging the same war, so he can't get away from it. So we can beat this all day, but it's not going to change. But